I will just give it a few seconds for everybody to join. We'll get started. All right, so we'll get started here. Welcome everybody to our interactive solutions session. Focus today is on coalition building and expansion to end homelessness. My name is Travis Doan. I'm from the Arizona Government Transformation Office. We work across the state with all the state agencies to support improvement and driving large programs across different agencies. And today we're helping to facilitate this interactive solution session. Myself and Josh Wagner as my co-facilitator will be supporting this interactive session where we'll be really getting a lot of your input and consolidating and working on some really challenging issues here. We have our esteemed panelists who have been presenting over the last 2 days that will help with really bringing out the discussion and talking about this issue. They'll have audio and video as you can see them so that we can have that extra discussion. So today we have Jocelyn Wilkinson from Arizona Department of Veteran Services, Joanna Carr, Arizona Housing Coalition, Pat Farrell from Jerry Ambrose Veteran Council, Karen Charles from Northern Arizona VA Healthcare Systems, Jocelyn Muzzin from Tucson Pima County VA Healthcare Systems. And those folks had just presented in our earlier session. Really great to hear both of those sessions this morning and yesterday. So I'll ask you guys to just introduce yourselves, starting with Jocelyn Wilkinson, who is also our moderator as part of our Veteran Services supporting this overall activity with our solution session. Just give a brief introduction to yourselves, and then we'll get started into our agenda.
Perfect. My name is Jocelyn Wilkinson. I'm the Homeless Veteran Program Administrator for Arizona Department of Veteran Services, and just work really closely alongside all of the panelists here on a system level, just in collaboration on how we can end veteran homelessness.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Joanna?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Joanna Carr. I'm the Research and Policy Director with the Arizona Housing Coalition. We're a member organization that operates under 3 pillars: advocacy, education, and coordination. And in the veteran space, I focus a lot on that coordination piece, involved in veteran work groups across the 3 continuums of care in Arizona, liaising with communities to help with the mission towards ending veteran homelessness. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. Pat.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm Pat Farrell from the Jerry Ambrose Veterans Council, and we are currently operating a Veterans Administration grant per diem program of 25 units to transition homeless veterans into housing first and possibly employment.
Great, thank you, Pat. And Karen.
Good morning, I'm Karen Charles. I'm the supervisor for the homeless housing programs in Mohave County, and I work out of the VA Kingman Clinic.
All right, thank you. And Jocelyn.
Hi, I'm Jocelyn Muzzin. I am a social worker at the Southern Arizona VA. I also work with 2 continuum of cares, Tucson Pima County, as well as the balance of state in our veteran work groups.
All right, thank you. All right, so for this interactive solution session, we do want everybody to participate, everybody who's on the line, especially our panelists, but also everybody who is participating here today. We have 3 different areas that we'll be getting into. First, we'll introduce the topic and talk about overall what's the problem and what kind of things that we're dealing with this problem. We'll take those problems and then we'll get into what potential causes or solutions can we really work on to really drive that. And then finally, we'll be looking at more specifically what kind of action can we be taking to really focus on improving those different areas. We have 3 different boards here in this interactive session. This is where we'll be collecting all of your chat information. So we'll be asking you to provide your comments in the chat, and then we'll be taking the chat comments from yourselves over into the board, into stickies, and we'll be organizing them and putting them into different groups and working through the process. So we can't promise that everybody's comments in the chat will be put into the board, but all of this will be recorded, including everything that's recorded in the chat. And we'll be providing that to our groups, to Veteran Services, and to our hosts, so that they can work on the problems and continue with the feedback that you've provided. So today's problem focus, homelessness is a very large problem. It's something that has a lot of different legs to it. Today we're focusing more in the realm of landlords and working in housing in that realm. So the problem focus today is there's currently not a landlord coalition in Arizona to prevent veteran homelessness. So that could be seen as a potential solution. But what kind of problems do we see that are around this? I don't know if Jocelyn, if you want to expand on this a little bit. I remember in your discussion yesterday, you talked a bit about the pilot that you're working and some of the situations that you're dealing with around this particular problem.
Sure. I mean, I think, just across the state, we talk about it in all the meetings, there's a lack of affordable housing. And, it's just a huge barrier in housing the general public, and especially in the veteran community. And so the focus is to maybe building landlords together to provide housing specifically for homeless veterans, and what that would look like. Having a coalition with service providers that the landlords could call when the veteran's in a crisis, or adding developers to the coalition and give them education on what it would look like to build a veteran-specific complex. So looking forward to all the feedback from the audience and the panelists today. And I just also wanted to mention, I spoke with our assistant director yesterday, and she asked me to mention just with all these solution sessions that our department is going to be taking these ideas and using them and building what we can in our department, and putting funds and work groups around it to address these issues aggressively. So just looking forward to everybody's participation today.
All right, thanks, Jocelyn. All right, so we'll get into the first section of this. It's really focused around the problems, and we'll spend probably 10 minutes or so. Everybody will be putting into the chat their thoughts. We'll be transcribing those into the board here and starting to organize those. So the question that we want everybody to try and answer and think about and put into the chat is, what are the most common landlord complaints when it comes to veteran housing? So expand a little bit and just think about, what kind of problems are we dealing with in this situation? I'll put a little timer on the board.
Hey, comment on that, Travis.
Yeah, please.
A lot of our veterans that were homeless and put up in hotels or in rental properties trash them, which leaves a sour taste in our landlord's mouth, and they really don't want to rent to the veterans again. Now, when times were hard, they loved the HUD-VASH vouchers. Okay. Now, when it's their chance to make money, it's kind of hard to ask them to, go back and take the HUD-VASH vouchers and live with that lower income, because the cost of living is going up for everyone.
Right. And I see some comments in the chat around, the voucher limit. A lot of the apartment complexes here in the Tucson, Pima County area are raising rent You know, if we have 6 or 7 veterans who are housed there and their voucher doesn't cover that, or they don't have the income to cover it themselves, they're also losing their housing. And then it's really limiting the veterans who have a voucher as to where they can go to get into housing.
And one thing we found in Kingman is sometimes veterans have been homeless for years, 15 years, and they don't know how to do housekeeping. They've never had to take care of a house. So that is something that we work with them on and acknowledge. And there are some limited housekeeping services available in Mohave County through WACOG. A person has to qualify, but we try to pull in any type of resource that we can to help the vet.
And we had a person on earlier this morning in the general session from Raytheon. Okay, maybe corporate sponsorships to pick up the slack might be considered as well.
Yeah, so that could be something we talk about when we get into the next one. We're talking really solutions to this. Really there's the sounds like lack of partnerships maybe is a potential problem, just lacking the connections.
I think, I'm sorry, go ahead, Pat.
I was gonna say, a lot of them don't even want paid with a credit card. Okay, they want cash or they want a check to get paid by, which kind of, in my case, I don't have cash laying around. I pay with either a credit card or a check, and they don't want that.
So landlords only want cash, is that what you're saying?
We have a small percentage, maybe 10%, that only want cash.
I think too, in line with what Karen was saying earlier, when you have veterans who've been on the street for many, many years and they get into an apartment, they want to share that with the people they know from the street too. They will bring folks over, understanding that lease and the terms of that lease and around guests and having people stay with you. We do have quite a few veterans who sometimes get into trouble because they're having their friends come over and not necessarily even trashing the place, but just not allowed by the lease.
Good.
Some of the complaints that I'm aware of is we have a lot of vets who they're struggling with some type of mental health challenge, and landlords are not therapists, and if there's any type of behavioral or acting out behavior that happens, sometimes the landlords they don't know how to address it. So that's part of what we do in VASH is provide whatever service the vet needs to help them maintain the stable housing. And again, with our housing specialist, we've developed really good relationships with some of our landlords. Some of the landlords have house multiple vets of our vets, and we have a really good relationship with the housing authority. And all of that helps. All of that ultimately helps the veteran.
Good point. And Jocelyn and I are inserting some of your comments into the chat as well, so we capture all of those. So that's really great. We're getting a lot of good comments here. And I've started organizing a few of them as I see some of the trends that were popping up. So potentially like are the issues around potentially trashing the housing, lacking the housekeeping, that kind of thing. Are that all around like breaking the lease as being one of the big problems?
I would say unauthorized guest is a huge reason why veterans are evicted. Just as a former housing specialist here in Phoenix, listening to landlords calling, saying someone is in the unit, they're living there, and then you make contact with the veteran and they're like, no, they're not. So even maybe, lack of communication between the landlord and the veteran could be one as well.
And I think I saw Jocelyn put something in about wraparound services. I mean, I would say that I have heard landlords who feel like like maybe the head bash team isn't responsive enough to some of their concerns of what's going on, you know, with that veteran. A lot of times we'll get calls from the landlord when probably the landlord should be calling the police, you know, and so helping the landlord to understand when is a time that, you know, we're able to help and when is there a time, you know, that, you know, we don't want to come over if someone's intoxicated and, you know, having some issues or there's a domestic violence issue or something like that. That's definitely a law enforcement issue. So, you know, I guess, but that's, I think, the perception of the landlord of what's the expectation.
That's a good point, Jocelyn. I recently heard one of them say, well, can't you force the veteran to get substance abuse treatment? And no, we can't. You know, it's a housing first model. We don't require that for a veteran to be housed. And we don't have the power to force anybody into treatment. It's their choice.
Yeah, that's a good one. All right, so yeah, we've got a lot of good comments here. Some focused around the financial capability, other ones around potentially violating lease rules at various levels, and that lack of the service and support to go with that as another big trend that we're seeing in a lot of the comments everybody's making.
Could you put the financial one up on the screen again over to the right? I just want,
Sure.
because we have a lot of the SSVF partners pay deposit and first month's rent for our VASH veterans. So that's really not a worry. Delays in VASH reimbursement, that's not an issue either in Mohave County, possibly in other areas, but it isn't here. And the credit history, you know, if a landlord is willing to work with Section 8 and work with VASH, that's really not an issue either.
Okay, well, yeah, we could definitely talk through these when we get into the next session, talking around solutions. Okay. Yeah, I think these are, you know, some of these just may be perceived, and some of them may be issues with some landlords and maybe other ones not. So it's really good to really get these out here on the board, understand these. Anything else we've got here? The last one here, Mohave County, some landlords would choose not to take Section 8, but will take VASH because of those wraparound services that are provided. So the differences in some of the vouchers. Josh is still transferring some of those over from our chat. Got about a minute left to document these.
I would just comment on them. Do they have income coming in? More and more in our community, you know, we have a veteran is definitely eligible for a VASH voucher if they have no income, but then we're having apartment complexes saying that, well, you must have income 3 times the income, you know, or whatever it is of the rent to actually qualify for our apartment. And so it's hindering some of our veterans from getting in.
Interesting.
I just want to add too that I feel like a lot of the conversation has been focused on VASH, but there's also issues with landlord engagement in SSVF too, and also just like self-resolvers right now, just because the housing market is so difficult.
Yeah, that's one thing we haven't necessarily got into here, which is just the market itself. I thought it was interesting, Jocelyn, you mentioned that you had made some vast improvements getting to 20 per month in housing from 14, but that was nothing like it was in previous years. It's just the market is just really tough. that's landlords, of course, you can't fault them for, trying to maximize all their investments.
Well, and that's where, landlords, I mean, they're a business, they're a profit-making business, and that's what their bottom line is. And so, how do we work with them and make it worth their while to work with us? That's the challenge.
So a question here, the whole issue around the vouchers, is that all around just the financial capability in that category, or is that like a whole nother problem that we're dealing with landlords?
I think just in general, it's just how rapidly the fair market rent is increasing. What feels like every 90 days, it feels like it's increasing quarterly versus in the past where, there would be yearly increases. So I think, when a public housing authority issues a payment standard, it's for the year, but we're in unprecedented times right now where the rent is just increasing so rapidly here in Arizona that, we just can't keep up. And, the participants are suffering in that aspect.
Yeah, there's a couple of ones here, the trends, around the housing market itself, and the landlords trying to keep up with that. And then also just that general thought around the stigma, not necessarily anything specific, but, the feeling that it's just not worth it for the landlord. So I see a comment here from Rodrigo. It's a long one. I'll read through it.
Yeah, Rodrigo, we have these conversations down here. We have this subset of veteran. Our programs work for a good number of veterans, but then those who really struggle with serious mental illness or substance abuse, they sometimes need something a little more structured than an independent apartment. But we don't have that here, right? Like there's a gap for folks who maybe need a little bit more structure, like what you're talking about.
Yeah, point. Okay, so let's take this. This is really great. I appreciate all the comments, everyone. I think this really helps explain a lot of what we're dealing with here with the landlords. So we'll take these categories that we've defined here and put those into the next section, which will focus on the next area, which is really considering the solutions. Let me take these and put them up here for reference. So considering these issues that we've been dealing with, the housing market challenges, the financial capability, violating the leasing rules, lack of health service support, the wraparound services, what positive landlord engagements have you had, and in what ways have you been involved? So really thinking about some of those bright spots, those positive things that we've seen that we can see as potential solutions. And Josh has done a great job already kind of listing in here some of those.
So one of the things that we're doing in Tucson, Pima County is we've created and are going to be sending out a landlord survey to get a sense from landlords around what kind of incentives might encourage them to open up, to accepting Section 8 vouchers or accepting them again, or maybe for the first time, just trying to get a sense of what they're looking for.
I think from a policy standpoint, there's a number of things that are being looked at in terms of the housing market challenges. And one of those is source of income discrimination protection. So as of now, a landlord can refuse to rent somebody with a hood bash voucher or other subsidy based on that reason alone. And there isn't any protection anywhere in Arizona for that. So it is possible that the state, federal, and local level, technically, it's a really, really difficult thing to get past. But Tucson is exploring that at the local level, and there's a number of other local municipalities that are interested in adding source of income to the list of protected characteristics. So that would be a great step towards resolving some of these housing market challenges, I guess.
That's great. And Josh is just noting that down there in one of the stickies.
Rebecca has a comment in the chat box. Staying in contact with landlords and property managers really makes a huge difference, even when they don't have openings. Communication is huge. Let them know you are still available after the housing process is completed. I think that is like the definition and absolutely the number one. Yes, just yes, yes, yes. Yeah, they want that.
Yeah, this is what we do. We build relationships with the vets in VASH and with the landlords and with the housing authority and with our community partners. So it's all very important.
Yes. Homie has a unique way of what they do with landlord engagement. They, Mike Shores created and his partners created a database called Padmission, where it's a centrally located database specifically for landlords and connecting the participants to landlords who have availability in units. And they also have landlord engagement specialists that are regularly in contact with the landlords and asking about unit availability. But it also gives the landlords a source of support that they can call someone to, speak with if they're having any issues. And I think that really kind of speaks to what Rebecca was saying, just being available for communication is so huge with landlords. When they call and they have an issue, they want a response. And those delayed responses will just leave a bad taste in their mouth, where they just say, you know what, I don't want to do any vouchers at all because of this one, reason, unfortunately.
I think that's just so critical too, like when we're talking about landlord engagement being like sign-on bonuses. We're hearing that often that's not enough. Incentivize a landlord, and we really need to build that relational piece into a landlord engagement model and make sure that landlords are supported throughout. So it's great to hear that that's happening in Mohave County, and I think it needs to be a focus all across the state.
Yeah, and I think too, individual agencies are really good at this. Some individual agencies are really good at that landlord engagement, but that we need to be looking at it as a coalition or community-wide effort, where we're all pooling our resources, we're all pooling our housing specialists and coming up with a coordinated plan for engaging landlords, not just on an agency by agency basis, but a community-wide effort.
I think another thing that would be helpful, and this has happened in the past, like building the political will for veteran housing. So for example, a mayoral or even better, a governor campaign, for housing veterans. And I believe that has happened in the past, and I think it'd be great in this housing market to have another initiative specifically around engaging landlords at that governor level.
Yeah, it's always good to feel they have your back.
Mm-hmm.
Annabelle has a chat comment. She says, we have housing for seniors built everywhere, like the 55 or 65 plus communities. Why do we not have that kind of plans for our veterans where they can have their support animals, and they could put the little houses on them. And I'll let anyone speak to that.
Yeah, I think along with the comment about hybrid CAS and SMI facility, like we need to get really creative for some of our veterans, right? Like the current system works for most, but we do have veterans who need something else, whether that's like, you know, not a traditional apartment complex where there's neighbors all around, or where it's a facility where there's a little bit more structure. You know, we need to think outside of traditional apartment complexes and think creatively about some housing solutions for those veterans.
Yeah, that's great.
We do have a, you know, I just gave the presentation on Kingman Veteran Villas. That is a community specifically for veterans, built specifically for homeless veterans in Kingman. But also, you know, we have a lot of senior veterans in Mohave County. And we are trying to get creative, way high up from leadership in the homeless program at the Muzzin at the VA, so that we can use the voucher to help pay for example, medical foster care homes that the VA has. We don't have any of those in Mohave County, but they do in Yavapai County, in Prescott, around Prescott. So we've been meeting and trying to work that out, and that is very creative, and it will hopefully meet the needs of the senior veterans better than we have been. There's also they're building a veterans home in Mohave County. Not sure if it's going to be in Lake Havasu or in Kingman, but that will be 100 beds.
Jeanne in the comment says we could work with potential landlords who are interested in developing veteran-specific housing so that they are aware and more invested in the process. For example, the city of Scottsdale has a new program called Brick by Brick, where the individual or family helps to make adobe bricks to build homes for themselves. The challenge is getting land to put the structures on. And Rodrigo says, sorry, I may have missed some earlier data on HUD-based success leading to permanent housing utilizing private apartment complexes. Can someone expand or revisit that comment?
In Kingman, we have a 48-unit project-based development called Kingman Veteran Villas. They broke ground, I think, at the end of 2019. We started admitting veterans, homeless veterans there who qualified in the fall of 2020. It took about 10 months to get the units filled, but they're filled. And it's fantastic, and it's lovely. It's very decent housing that helps build dignity in veterans. It's the first one in Northern Arizona.
I'll just put that on there. It's a specific example.
I think too, just around all of this conversation around creativity and development, building partnerships with the local municipality is really important because of the zoning aspect.
Yeah.
You know, because so many, you know, great ideas come about and then it gets squashed at city council because it can't pass development. And so I think building those relationships up front with planning departments and city councils, elected officials to again build the will help to make creative solutions happen.
That says that they are working on tiny home RV type park in Mohave County, Pat.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead, speak
Okay,
to
yeah,
that.
I lost my audio there. Yeah, we're working on that. We have a grant, a very generous grant from the foundation, and we're working with the GEO group who runs the prison through their work-based education program to build the tiny homes. It's a win-win for everybody.
Good stuff. And just kind of even to expand on Jan, and I hope I'm saying your name right, comment in the chat, you know, we could work with potential landlords who are interested in developing veteran-specific housing. I think that's kind of the vision behind this whole landlord coalition. And if the Department of Veterans Services could lead this on a statewide level where we have statewide stakeholders like our panelists and bring in those landlords and developers to help guide them in what it looks like to expand veteran housing. You know, I think this is where this could be very useful for today.
A question that kind of brings up, you know, not for me, not knowing the situation very well, is when we talk about veteran-specific housing, are there veteran-specific housings that are private landlord-owned as well as owned by VA and other organizations?
There are private developments that have like really great partnerships that have taken place, like between private developers and nonprofits, to create affordable housing units for veterans. So the low-income housing tax credit, which is a subsidy for developing affordable housing, there are actually bonus points for subpopulation focus. So if a developer wants to build a property and set aside like X amount of units for veterans, then they kind of get more points to get the subsidy. So there's been a few projects around the state that have used the low-income housing tax credit and created really nice affordable housing projects for veterans.
Okay.
And that's a subsidy that's available every year, but it's just very, very competitive.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of that discussion.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion in the chat. Did you want to go, Jocelyn? And I'll read these afterwards.
I was just going to clarify that the HUD VASH vouchers are housing choice vouchers. So they get used with private landlords. So each veteran, when they get their voucher, they can go out and look for an apartment with any landlord that it takes Section 8. The VA doesn't typically own any housing for veterans. Even in Northern Arizona, at the Northern Arizona VA, I think there's a low-income tax credit housing project on that campus, but all the VA does is lease out the land, and that project is run by the developers and management company, you know, who put a bid on it. Karen would probably know more about it. I don't know the specifics, but the VA doesn't usually own housing.
Thank you for that clarification, Jocelyn. And just some of the comments, Lieutenant Amber Herzog says, community knowledge, the more the community knows about the challenges, the more social pressure there is for the governments and housing landlords to make changes. Yes, and that sounds like where Joanna's talking about pulling in political will and pro-homeless veteran politicians and legislators.
Yes, and I just want to add to that, that I completely agree. And the piece around engaging the community is really key, because it's the community who really have that influence in local government. You know, when affordable housing developments are being passed, the city council members are going to be listening to their constituents. And so, yes, building will within the community is really, really important.
And Maria says, when I was a caseworker in New Jersey working for Catholic Charities, I ran a foster home program for seniors, matching a senior who needed housing with a senior who needed the income in order to maintain their housing, and it worked very well. There was a strong peer component that helped alleviate isolation and also keep the seniors mentally healthy. It worked well, and we had several very good success stories. So that sounds like, again, that strong wraparound services needed for the veteran to be successful in the unit. Joan says transitional facilities like the JAVC project can work with veterans to develop their knowledge and strengths that will help them to be successful renters. Absolutely. Veterans getting those independent living skills while they're in the unit is so vital. Jeanne says an identified source of potential landlord solutions is working with local church groups and capitalize on their unused portions of their campus. That's what Scottsdale and Mesa are doing for senior specific affordable housing. And I'll let this panel speak to any of those comments if you want.
I have a comment on the first one you read. I can't remember who it was from, around the senior matching. So this reminds me of a really important solution, which is the shared housing model, because at this time, the reality is, especially veterans on fixed incomes, finding units that are affordable is really difficult. And so shared housing is often an option. And this is more for veterans, maybe in like SSVF programs or otherwise. But traditionally, shared housing hasn't worked for programs. And so there is a lot of conversation around the state and some efforts with the Shared Housing Institute as to how programs can adapt to allow shared housing. But it can get tricky because the match has to be right. And I think the comment mentioned peer-to-peer, and it's really important that the match between veterans will work. So I think that this is something that communities can really start to look at and explore right now. So I think that's a really great model.
Yeah, a lot of really great solutions out there. Of course, we know there's a lot of challenges and barriers, but we do definitely see some of those bright spots where things really are working. So we focused in on a few key areas, a few key groupings, policy and rules, maintaining those communications and relationships, ensuring we've got those wraparound programs and services, and then that veteran-specific housing. It seemed like a lot of those coalesced around those four key areas. So let's move into the next one. This is really great discussion. Great chat, everybody. A lot of really good comments in the chat. I'll take these categories here and move down into our next area, which is really more focused on what kind of actions are we taking or can we consider to be taking going forward. So let me take these categories we have from the last session here. And in the last bit that we've got here, the last 15, 20 minutes, in your chat and in discussion, talk about what are the critical actions we need to take when building a landlord coalition. That there was a great example in the previous one, a solution around just having that database so that everybody knows what's out there, what's available, who's working with who. So if we take the next 15 minutes or so and in the chat or in your discussions, document what kind of critical actions we can take or already maybe in the works.
I think what we found when we were figuring out how to send out this landlord survey, every different agency was like, well, I have a list of 25 landlords that we work with. Or I have a list, and someone else would have a list of 50, and we're like compiling this list. Again, that collaboration is so key. Our PHA down here has a list of everyone who takes Section 8. How do we get that list? How do we involve the PHA in this conversation and encourage their participation as well? So that central database that would be wonderful to have something like that everyone can tap into.
So a little bit more on that, besides availability of units to know what's out there, what other kinds of things could that centralized information have? What do you guys see out there that works? that the landlords need.
I think, the centralized databases that I have seen just have a lot of information about, what the landlords are looking for in terms of, people to come. So what are their deposits like? What utilities are included? The database really, you can sort it in a way that people can find exactly what's going to meet their need if they have openings. If they're located near a bus, that kind of stuff. In terms of how that landlord database can benefit landlords, that's a really interesting question, something I would want to think about some more, besides getting their vacancies filled. That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think,
Oh, go ahead, Joanna.
oh, thank you. I think some just general information and resources for landlords around what the programs are, and how landlords can be supported in the event of an issue. So for example, we've been working over the last year or so on a few toolkits, including a landlord toolkit that includes resources, say if one of their renters, gets into a situation where they can't pay the rent, where can they get the help? So kind of building this idea of landlords supporting veterans, so knowing what resources are available. And in the case of HUD-VASH, making sure the landlord has, for example, the case manager contact, just simple things.
I just wanted to read some of the comments in the chat. Cheryl says, we recently hosted a meet and greet among homeless veterans and they wanted shared housing to make matches. And Joanna spoke to that. And then, oh, go ahead, Joanna, did you want to say something? Okay, I'll go on to the next one. Host a meet and greet, social with interested and maybe who are interested in the community that desire shared housing to make matches. Ali says having accommodations for disabled veterans. I think maybe she'd be listing that on a database as an option on the database. And then Lieutenant Amber Herzog says, I think the trainings we receive in social services, examples of trauma-informed care should be made for and made available for them so they are more confident in leasing, knowing when to call 911 or APS instead of HUD-VASH, etc. Information is powerful. That is an awesome comment. Yes, just giving them a step-by-step on what to do when a veteran is in crisis and who to call. Jan says, maybe a question and answer website for landlords with identified points of contacts who can locally address their concerns. That's another good one. R. White says, I know that affordable housing is not really a thing. However, shared housing is a hard sell for many of the veterans we work with through SSVF. Any suggestions on how to sell shared housing with older veterans would be appreciated. And I'll let anyone speak to that since, that was a question.
We just could let them know that in the future, they're going to need more and more help, and they could actually act as caregivers for each other depending upon the mix.
Yeah, and I think just the transparency of the housing market, the reality is that, going into shared housing is going to be more affordable. And so just having those very transparent conversations of, as of now, the market doesn't support a single income in a lot of cases. And so this could really be, in some cases, the only option other than having no housing. So I think it's hard for a lot of the, I think it was older veterans mentioned, that shift from having your own space and housing towards what the reality is now. And that's a hard shift, but it's just a case of real transparent conversation.
That's good stuff. Jan says a great concept with the information or landlord information toolkit. Joanna, do we have one of those? Don't we have one built already or no?
We do have a landlord toolkit. It's specifically for Maricopa County right now because it's built from the Maricopa County Veteran Inflow Working Group, but I am working on creating a statewide one. And I believe we also have a statewide one already for non-veterans, so just the general population. So I can dig those out and share them.
Thank you. And Joan says, learn what landlord concerns are and assure that they experience follow-up and include them in developing solutions. And I know Jocelyn mentioned that Tucson is building that, compiling that landlord engagement survey. And I know she mentioned that's probably one of the questions that they'll have on there is, and I'll let you speak to that, Jocelyn.
Yeah, several of the questions are around what are your concerns about taking Section 8 vouchers? If you used to take them and you don't anymore, what are the reasons why? What are some things that might make you reconsider taking a Section 8 voucher? So, really trying to get their feedback and understand, where does their motivation lie? Some landlords want to help veterans because, that's just their moral compass and that's what they want to do. They want to help people. Some landlords are just looking at the bottom line, so really, and I guess for every landlord, it's going to be different, but getting that feedback is so important. They have to be part of the conversation.
Absolutely. Travis, did you want to say anything before I continue with the comments?
Just from the previous discussion that we'd had around the problems and solutions, there was also that comment, I think it was Joanna maybe, talking about surveying the landlords. So we can put that in there as well.
Or did you need me to clarify anything?
If you want to, yeah, if you want to add to it, that would be great. Just talk about it a little.
Can you just remind me?
Yeah, surveying landlords to understand what financial models they would support. Which is
that was Jocelyn.
Jocelyn, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. Yeah, and so one of the questions is specifically around incentives, would landlords support more of a, so we've talked about how sometimes veterans might leave an apartment a little a mess. And when they leave, the landlord has a lot of repairs that they need to make. So we've heard about a landlord mitigation fund. We used to have one statewide, but it provides some financial opportunity for the veteran or for the landlords to get some financial assistance with making repairs if there's damage done to their apartment. Other options have included like a bonus, a signing bonus, or you just get this extra money if you will take one of our veterans into your apartment complex. We'll give you a double deposit. There are just some options that we put out there, and then we left it open to hear from them. Is there anything else that they could tell us that they think would help incentivize them to take our veterans?
Yeah, get creative. Yeah, find out new ways, things that they really are going for.
I think too, one other thing I want to add to this is that I think when building any coalition or effort is to be mindful about equity, because the reality is that some veterans experience greater challenges in obtaining housing based on protected characteristics. Someone mentioned disability, but also race, gender, ethnicity, etc. So understanding that the population is beyond just veterans is really important. So like one obvious way to address this at the beginning of building a coalition is to ensure that there's representation on that coalition that reflects the diversity of veterans served. So for example, ensuring that there's somebody on that coalition that has experienced or can speak to issues for veterans that experience disability, for an example.
That's a great point. Okay.
Yes.
I'll just put that down on a sticky here. Go ahead, Jocelyn.
No, I was just gonna, the comments are kind of flowing in and I want to make sure every comment is heard. So Joan says to learn what landlord concerns are and ensure that they experience follow-up and include them in developing solutions, which is a great comment. I think that would be a part of the purpose of the coalition is really for the landlords to have a voice to speak to, you know, us, the guys who are trying to house them and work in that partnership. Rebecca says it's hard for landlords to make the decision to go forward with shared housing due to separate leases and so on. And there's definitely, you know, that's definitely a concern. And then HUD has their policy. You know, I don't think you can do shared housing with HUD badge. So there's a lot of policy conversation that needs to continue to happen around shared housing.
They are moving forward with shared housing in Mohave County, Jocelyn.
Oh, awesome. Okay,
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Rodrigo says a meet and greet and follow-up mixers with a group of other vets may soften up senior vets to shared housing, maybe allowing some to choose at least one of their roommates. That sounds really good too. Does anyone want to speak to that before I go to the next one?
I would like to just add to that. I think that's a great idea, and it's something we've spoken about in, you know, like GPD transitional housing, where veterans are sharing a room, and there's been this historic issue around the state of you know, veterans not necessarily moving on because they like that camaraderie and they build those relationships, and so could some shared housing initiatives be focused on those GPD sites and veterans that already have built that shared living space? I think would be a great thing.
Annabelle says, once establishing landlords that are renting to veterans, make sure to follow up with them maybe once or twice a month to make sure they are not having difficulties. Yes, that goes into those wraparound services. Lieutenant Amber Herzog says, encouraging landlords that are reminding them how powerful it is to encourage and provide for veterans, reminding them of the why can motivate them to want to do more. And that's just a very true comment. I think in general, most landlords who are dedicated to housing veterans are pretty passionate around that movement anyway. So I think really even targeting those passionate landlords and making sure they're a part of the landlord coalition and just having seats at the table so their passion is heard to expand more housing. And Travis, there's no more comments and I'll let you take it from there.
All right, thanks. It's really great discussion. I think there's a lot that's been documented here. You all have a great deal of knowledge and in the chat, a lot of knowledge in the room. So I think, you know, this has really been really interesting, very, very interesting discussion. You've got some things to take away, Jocelyn and group. I think these are definitely a good start when you're talking about that landlord coalition. So we're just about at the end of our time. So we'll close it out here and say if there's any parting words you'd like to have, Jocelyn or anybody else who's been in the group discussing.
I'll let the panel take us out if anybody has comments.
I just want to add, I know that in Mohave County, the Housing Authority is doing a housing study, I think for the first time since 2016. And our biggest input to them was that we have to look at the payment standards because it just aren't keeping up with the cost of housing now. It's just not realistic. And if our goal is also, you know, if our goal is to help landlords build wealth, which it seems to be, our other goal has to be that we have to house people. We have to be able to house them, and the payment standard is going to have to go up.
Absolutely, 100%. Anyone else have any final comments?
Beware inflation.
Yes. Yes. It's slaughtering our poor right now. It's slaughtering the poverty class, the inflation is, and
Slaughtering the middle class as well.
yes, it is. Yes. I will just leave with this, that I will definitely be taking this back to Department of Veteran Services. My personal plan is to build this coalition on a statewide level and bring in stakeholders. So anyone who is interested in being a part of building this, I'm going to put my email in the chat to reach out to me, and we can start building and seeing what we can do to get secure landlords into housing our homeless veterans.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks everybody for participating. I think this has been a lot of fun. So if there's no more comments, then we'll close it out. Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.